And following up there, hello to everyone that's just joined. We just shared that we're going to get started around 12:01. Oh, and we've hit that point. All right. So we can officially begin. So greetings to everyone that's here today. My name is Bill Pink, and I lead the solutions architecture team here at Morning Consult. My team is responsible for the development of all of our offers across various business domains. That includes segmentation, pricing, campaign effectiveness, and of course, the topic for today's session, corporate reputation. Joining me today is my friend and colleague, Ivan Rakabada, who's our lead solutions architect for corporate reputation. And together we are delighted to present to you our webinar, Reputation Reimagined, a new framework for strategic communications. Before we really begin the presentation, a little housekeeping. This should be about 35 to 40 minutes of content, and we'll be able to answer questions for about 10 minutes or so at the end. And while we are presenting, we won't be able to answer questions on the fly, but please share your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And of course, we will follow up with others offline as time permits. And our ultimate goal is for this session really to be the beginning of a conversation, not the end. And we will share and post everything online for everyone that could not attend or wants to share with others. Now we're going to dive in. So what you see here is what we really believe sets Morning Consult apart, whether we're talking about reputation or any of our offers. We feel that these are our first principles behind all the offers that we build. And we want to share that with you and have you sort of think about that as Ivan moves into how this applies to reputation in a moment. So to start, we always start with decision intelligence. This is our North Star, and we always think about the decisions you need to make, in this case, as it relates to reputation management and measurement, when we're building our solutions with a goal to everything being faster, to being deeper, and to being more actionable insights. To get there, we've set up technology-enabled sampling as our foundation for everything we do. This allows us to cover the highest level of frequency in data collection, the highest coverage of audiences from Gen Pop to niche audiences, as well as fuel our analytics, uncover patterns, uncover hidden insights, and inform decisions. Third, everything we build and you're going to learn about has an end-to-end data creation and curation process behind it, built off technology, analytics, and expertise. And knowing who's in this audience, I know you're fully aware of how messy data can be. And we're always working to ensure all of our results and recommendations are as accurate as possible. And then our fourth first principle that informs everything we do is we're always grounded in evidence of how people think, feel, and act, and how this translates into commercial effects. Effectively, this knowledge or IP is embedded in all of our offers in terms of the design, which ensures actionability tied to the decisions you want to make. So again, this framing is our first principles for everything we do. And as Ivan walks you through the framework, you'll see how this applies to reputation. And if we go one more, perfect. And also wanted to share, in case you're not familiar, we have three primary ways of delivering insights, and all of them apply to the framework you're about to learn about. Whether we're talking about a macro level context and trends, which we deliver through what we call PRO, which are highly curated summaries, data, analyses, reports from our team of consumer, economic, and political experts. Whether we're talking about our intelligence platform, which provides instant access and insights about reputation, psychographics, economics, media habits across thousands of businesses around the globe, and houses our new reputation score, which Ivan will share in a moment. And last but not least, the framework also encompasses our custom reputation solutions, where we standardize around best-in-class measurement techniques to get at emotions, specific category attributes, and ultimately depth in informing decision points along your strategic journey. So all of this is the setup for the reputation framework, which is what you're about to learn about. So Ivan, over to you.
Thank you. So I would assume most of you have heard these facts about reputation before, about how reputation impacts market value, how reputation is a talent magnetism, right? 69% of job seekers won't work for a company with a poor reputation. We know that reputation impact consumer loyalty, purchase intent, and right now reputation is now part of the dashboards of the CEO or even the risk frameworks. Certainly, there are key topics to consider, as reputation is one of the company's most important intangibles that greatly impacts its market value. We all have, at some point for the past 5 to 10 years, discussed the importance of reputation, yet agencies continue to bring these topics up. I think it's time to move forward. Hello, my name is Ivan Rocabado, and I have been an advisor in the reputation management space for over 12 years, with experience in both the US and Europe. Today, I'm speaking to you from Spain, having spent 3 years as a digital nomad working for US and global reputation projects across multiple types of communication teams. Joining Morning Consult opened up the opportunity for me to collaborate with a team of experts in brand and research fundamentals, which enables me to design the next generation reputation framework. This framework is supported by rapid insights, technology-enabled sampling, and a culture of innovation. Just take a look at Morning Consult AI, and you can see how Pioneer is being built. Why is this important to me? Because I noticed how the legacy reputation models I worked on connected with the communications team as if they were researchers, forcing the teams to adapt to the models instead of the models adapting to the teams. I recall during the pandemic, with my dear friend Ann Potts, we conducted interviews with communication leaders and CCOs about how they were utilizing reputation data from all these various legacy models that they were purchasing. I have to tell you, it was a clear turning point for me as I heard how they had to adapt the information they received to make it actionable. That became my guiding principle: how to support actionability for the communications team. The focus, both for me and for Morning Consult, is to evolve how we support the communication function with a new perspective on reputation management, as both reputation and the communications functions have evolved. Reputation needs a new lens, and it's because of the recent reputation evolution. When I look at the space today, these are some of the key pressing challenges in reputation. First, the concept of trust deficit. There's a declining confidence in business. Trust in institutions, especially large corporations, is weakening worldwide, with only 26% of stakeholders believing companies can address societal issues. Stakeholders are skeptical of vague messaging and performative purpose statements. Trust across all groups, from employees, customers, regulators, investors, key opinion leaders, prospects, they require consistent action, transparency, and clear intent. The second point is around hyperpolarization, creating a narrative risk. Social, political, and generalities divide and transform once neutral topics like ESG and DEI into reputation minefields. Even silence is viewed as taking a stance. Words or omissions are interpreted through polarizing lens. Messaging that appeals to one group might alienate another. Using the same language for everyone can harm brand authenticity. The third point is around reputational speed because of the acceleration of risk. AI, social media, the 24/7 news cycle have shrunk the reaction windows to minutes. Reputation crises unfold faster than most teams can respond. By the time traditional research flags a shift, the narrative has hardened. Proactive insights and preemptive messaging are now essential. And lastly, there's an identity fragmentation and at the same time, a cultural relevance. As an ex-team leader and now working on a young and hyper company, it continues to surprise me that we now have 4 generations in the workplace. And on top of that, we need to deal with dozens of cultural lenses outside of the organization. Stakeholders want to see themselves reflected in a brand story. And here is the most important part of all. Employees also want to be part of building a reputation from the inside out. Corporations often struggle to speak to multiple audiences authentically and simultaneously. Relevance and emotional connections are the new currency of reputation. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's take a look at Patagonia. Everyone loves the brand and what it stands for. But that was not enough for the company. Although they are consistently recognized as a purpose-driven organization, their founders has given away the company to fight climate change. The result? Well, it went from media admiration to employee devotion to customer uber loyalty, and the brand mythology just exploded. They created an even stronger emotional bond with their customers. The result is what you see here, a constant increase in favorability. Now let's look at the opposite, at the other side of the coin, Tesla. We have seen over and over again cases around Tesla. The company has been declining over the past 5 years, and we know that Tesla has attempted to shape perceptions of the organization, but it hasn't boosted consideration. Why? In my opinion, it's because we're asking the wrong question. The question should be, would you buy a Tesla? If after evaluating all the company attributes and crafting narratives around them, there is still no change in consideration, it indicates a deeper issue. The brand doesn't connect with stakeholders. The brand self-expansion isn't present. Relating to the organization is not there. So fixing this requires actions both on values, on identity, on emotional bonds. Once we understand that, then communications can respond accordingly. It's about taking action in the narrative, linking the stakeholder to the company, not just talking about linking attributes of the company. Another example is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is a traditional reputation crisis case study. But take a look at this trend on trust. I don't think that it's the case anymore. Right now, what we're seeing is that Wells Fargo is a prime example of how to build trust. They've done it through 5 key areas. They launched the Rebuilding Trust campaign. It's a highly impact PR campaign titled, Rebuilding Trust, focusing on transparency, accountability, and structural reforms that they launched back in 2023. Second, they expanded the community investment and financial inclusion. Wells Fargo focused its initiatives in underinvested communities with campaigns such as the Banking Inclusion Initiative and partnership with Unidos US for Latino homeownership. These programs supported financial literacy, small business growth, and economic empowerment. A lot of community impact was recognized on Wells Fargo. Then, pioneering sustainable finance and ESG infrastructure. Wells Fargo's committed over $178 billion, and I checked this, $178 billion in sustainable finance starting in 2021. They launched the Institute for Sustainable Finance and issued a $2 billion climate bond to aid low carbon and housing projects. Then in June 2025, the Federal Reserve lifted the long-standing $1.95 trillion asset cap imposed after the fake account scandal. And finally, they looked inwards. They improved governance, employee care, and operational transparency. They published a comprehensive sustainability and governance report. They revamped its code of conduct, enhanced benefits like childcare leave and health savings, and increased voluntary disclosure, especially related to diversity, ESG, and stakeholder impact, building reputation from within. So to support a trust journey like what we're seeing here for Wells Fargo, right, or for any client, there's a need not just to take a look at a standard set of attributes to measure the perceptions of an organization, but we need to do a specific view of a set of attributes that are unique for the client or unique for the sector. The communication teams require proprietary attributes to support their message house or their corporate playbook or their communication strategic plan, however it's named at the organization. And we know that we have methods that can help identify those unique attributes to support distinctive message building. Trust is unique for everyone. And Morning Consult knows that every study needs to be designed to evolve with the organization. And talking about evolution, we know that the communications role is evolving as well. Communication is now a strategic force at the core of corporate decision making, with the chief communication officer sitting at the C-suite table, guiding reputation, risk, strategy, AI policies with data and foresight. The idea of having a seat at the table is already outdated. The new CCOs are strategic advisors who shape the business agenda. We could say it's now the strategic table that they are part of. So these that you see on the screen here are, in my opinion, 4 of the most pressing reputation challenges CCOs face today, among 100 others. But first, for me, reputational volatility and real-time risk is key. The speed of reputational damage has accelerated due to AI, social media, misinformation, hyper-politicization. Narrative threat emerge in minutes, not weeks anymore. CCOs are no longer responding to yesterday's news cycle. They must anticipate sentiment shifts before they spike, especially across polarized audiences and stakeholders with conflicting expectations. The loss of stakeholder confidence is, for me, number 2. According to the Page Society, the confidence index report that they issued, fewer than 30% of stakeholders believe businesses can solve for social challenges. That means that the community impact and the admired employer metrics need to be enhanced. Even fewer believe that brands offer both action and context. Why does this matter? Because reputational bar has moved. It's not enough to act. You must explain why you act. Shareholders or stakeholders demand transparent context and not corporate generalities. Third is the fragment stakeholders and the polarized narratives. Different audiences interpret the same brand message in radically different ways. Gen Z wants value-first storytelling, while baby boomers want clear messaging on financial responsibilities. Political identity now affects brand affinity. One-size-fits-all messaging erodes reputation. CCOs must understand the emotional alignment across all groups that they need to manage and plan strategies accordingly. And finally, the concept of AI, but AI from the ethics of reputation as a battleground. We know that AI is transforming businesses, but also creating ethical landmines. Privacy, transparency, misinformation, stakeholders are watching how companies implement it. Communication leaders must guide internal AI use and shape narratives that reinforce transparency, ethics, and corporate character and credibility. Therefore, we require a new lens for the reputation in 2025, one that is designed explicitly for communications. Because we know that stakeholders usually develop an emotional bond with brands before they understand them logically. A strong reputation is built when emotions create positive perceptions, which then become ingrained feelings that influence behavior. Communication needs to be actionable. That's the clear pillar. We need to focus on the stories that the comms teams shares daily, shaping emotional response, framing perceptions, and guiding narratives through meaningful outcomes. That's why this model was developed for communication professionals, not for researchers. Therefore, a new Morning Consult's reputation framework links emotions, which drives first impressions, to perceptions on the conscious side because perception gives meanings to emotions. Then we measure conscious emotions, which are feelings. Feelings are different than the emotions because feelings are where reputation solidifies. And then we end up with business motivators, because the reality is that reputation only matters if it drives action. This is a process that was meant to be undertaken by communications. In the same way that they do their work in terms of storytelling, we are managing this, our philosophy. At the core of this, we have the new strategic perspective on an overall reputation score. It's an open score system that considers brand appeal and corporate credibility. We've been talking about this on how reputation has evolved and how the communication team has evolved. We aim to reflect the promise a brand makes to its stakeholders through favorability and value, as well as how the company fulfills its commitments via corporate credibility and character. And this includes trust, being an admired employer, and community impact. How do they see you? Do they want to work for you? How do you represent yourself in the community, in sustainability efforts, etc.? We identify positive and negative associations to each one of these metrics because we recognize that those negative influences are influencing reputation. We need to acknowledge and address negative perceptions through strategic communication that builds on positive associations over time. We can address negatives, but we also know that there is a clear validation of reputation enhancement when we talk about positives over the negatives. More positives will cover your negatives. And this same perspective, the same point of view, we carry it on our syndicated platform. You know, what Bill started talking at the beginning, the Morning Consult Intelligence platform. This is a point of view that we carry across our Morning Consult Intelligence platform, the MCI, as well as a new reputation framework that I just explained. The beauty of MCI is that it's always on, and it has been on since 2017. We've been measuring this 5 metrics since then, providing you today with a reputation score that goes back as long as we've been tracking your brands. So we're not starting today with a reputation score. We can build it to how we've been measuring those 5 metrics before. So once you go into MCI today, you will see all the back data on the reputation score. It's phenomenal. Our syndicated platform, we track more than 5,000 plus brands daily, where it's built on 80 million plus interviews across 40 plus markets that you can compare, updated daily, benchmark across industries and regions. And with the massive sample size we gather, it allows you to build audiences specific to your interests. Just look at how we can take a look at this wide variety of areas. We can take a look at brands from sports leagues to convenience stores, to nonprofits, to fast casual restaurants, motorcycles, apparels. I mean, it just gives us the opportunity to learn what is going on across categories and across audiences. Just look at how different is how the brands relate in the sports league category, in terms of the NFL being the top ranked reputation brand versus 23 points difference to the lowest performance. Same thing in nonprofits. St. Jude's Children's Hospital reputation versus the lowest performance, there's a 32-point gap. Right? Same thing in apparel. Things that we don't see in convenience stores or in fast casual restaurants. The gaps are much lower, right? So you can learn what is going on across categories and across audiences. And if we don't want to look at across audiences, let me just take the sports league and just go through different audiences that we have in MCI, from the general population, where we see the leader as NFL, and we see NFL leading, obviously NFL fans, college man respondents, weekly sports viewers. And the MLB fans, obviously MLB is the number one rated brand in terms of reputation. But when we take a look at women in college or liberal ideology, we see how the National Women's Soccer League, it starts going up in the ranking, right? And how this is very different than conservative ideology. So it's fascinating what you can discover and learn from all the possibilities that MCI offers, and the reputation score is now available for you. That's what we just launched a couple of weeks ago with the Most Trusted Brand Report. So I know that we always like to see examples. Let me take you to two examples that I got from the Most Trusted Brand Report that I thought were really interesting. One is TikTok, right? With all the political rhetoric that we are hearing around TikTok that we heard at the beginning of this administration, I was expecting a clear decline in trust and reputation. Well, it's up there in the rankings for millennials. When we compare millennials versus adults, there's almost a 14-point difference in TikTok in millennials. Why is this? Look how the trend of TikTok has moved in terms of trust across millennials. We see here the big decline of TikTok in 2022 when ByteDance was accused of improper use of user data. All that was in the news, but after that, it's been recuperating trust across millennials. We hit the first ban regulation conversation in the Biden administration. Then we hit the second conversation around a TikTok ban during this administration, but trust continues to increase. And I went further. I went to look at Republicans, and it's coming out of the red zone. It's coming out of the negative trust and moving up in terms of the positive trust. And I went even deeper. I looked at the reputation score around millennials, and it's obviously because trust is one element of the reputation score, and millennials, it stays very stable through both bands, and now we see how it's increasing. Even more, data sensitive, tech savvy millennials, very unique audience, we see there that trust is building. And it's building because there's a purpose behind TikTok and what they're doing. And I just came across something really interesting in LinkedIn. They were talking about a TikTok quarterly safety report. So they're supporting trust broadly, and it's working for them. So it was really interesting to take that learning from the Most Trusted Brand Report and seeing how it evolves. Let me give you another example. Google, again, within millennials, is one of the most trusted brands. And then we see here, if we compare Google, the trend that we have on trust versus Microsoft, there's been always an important gap. But if we now take a look at how the reputation score has been built and the trend that we have available, that gap is not there. And because reputation is a multidimensional metric that is comprised of 5 metrics, right? No black box open in terms of for you to see, we can identify that net favorability and net value are the ones that are driving the reputation score for both companies. That's a brand appeal, not corporate credibility or corporate character. So reputation and Google need to work more in terms of what do they represent for their stakeholders, what do they represent for communities to elevate trust. And it was even interesting, but I didn't put it here as a fun fact. We're starting to measure daily AI users. 2 years ago, we couldn't even get 5 respondents. Now, we have enough sample to take a look at the reputation score across Google and Microsoft through this interesting lens. And what we're seeing is that both companies are head-to-head in terms of the reputation score on daily AI users. That means that in the future, the success of the tech space, right, it's going to be about targeting unique audiences with unique messaging and unique narratives. So there's a lot to learn about what we can find in MCI. We have, we can cut across different categories and you can cut across different audiences. But if you want to go deeper and understand the why, that's why we build this new communication model, because it's a model that looks to understand audiences, different attributes, and different perspectives to talk about a new way of addressing and being more actionable and reputation. A new model framework built on everything I've just talked until now, from emotions, perceptions, feelings, into the business motivators. And for each one of these sections, we have different research modules. It starts, with the emotional score, reputation score, attributes, feeling, self-expansion, leading us into action. It's a process. We were talking to a client yesterday, and she clearly saw this. Oh, this is my process. This is my bread and butter, in terms of what I do. And everything starts for us with emotions, because emotions drives first impressions. Emotions are the automatic gut level reaction stakeholders have towards a company. These reactions are effective, fast, and largely subconscious. So even though we're measuring this implicitly, this is the starting point of affinity or aversion. It's often shaped by the tone, the symbolism, the crisis response, the authenticity of the corporate brand. And many companies say that they are giving you, right, the emotional connection to their corporation, but they're based on conscious perceptions of metrics. We are using a true emotional understanding. It's been validated. It's a brand self-study where we're measuring emotional connection to the brand. We measure it through this method of concentric circles that we're using in our brand studies. So we're carrying into reputation the whole validation that we've done in our brand work at Morning Consult, and that has been validated since the beginning of the 2000s, right? And it's interesting to see because, we've implemented this across, as I told you, across the brand work, and the emotional connection looked at across the share of wallet, right? And we measure QSR, we measure others. But here in this example, the top part, we see how the emotional connection increases and the share of wallet also increases for most of the QSR companies, right? We did the same thing with reputation. We measure banks, fintech, telecommunications, beverage brands, and we correlated how this emotional connection correlates to actions. And in this case, in the chart below, we see here likelihood of recommending the company as an action, right? So we see at the top how Coca-Cola, PayPal, Pepsi are highest in terms of how they recommend, depending on how emotionally connected they are. But it's interesting here that there is a very important jump on Verizon, right? When they are highly connected to the respondent, to the stakeholders, we see that there is a big increase in terms of their likelihood to recommend the company. So all this adds to the knowledge of how we need to interpret the communication that we're going to put out there. How do we increase this emotional connection? Then we moved into perceptions. And in perceptions, we have the same reputation score as we discussed. 5 metrics, 2 dimensions, 1 point of view, no black box. But the uniqueness here is that we are customizing the attribute list to measure unique perception. As mentioned in Wells Fargo's example, the implications for the business must be assessed in the light of the unique set of attributes relevant to the sector and to the company. So we have a standard set of attributes, but we can define through a very robust analytic process which additional attributes to include, or if there are proprietary ones to consider. Attributes that support your strategy, your message house, or your corporate playbook are key because those are the ones that are needed to interpret, the perceptions. You don't need to adapt to a standard set of attributes. We adapt to you in terms of your needs. Then we follow with feelings and self-expansion, right? To understand how perceptions are internalized and how stakeholders connect with the corporate brand. Now, the feelings are where campaigns succeed or fail. This is where we succeed in terms of building loyalty, trust, and advocacy. And we measure this through the affective slider model, which is validated in the research space, and through the Schwartz theory that captures that essence of how stakeholders perceive their identities, values, and being reflected and enhanced through their association with the company. This is the question that we said around the Tesla example. Would you buy a Tesla? All my perceptions are high. I understand what Tesla is in terms of innovation. I understand what Tesla is in terms of their sustainability impact, but I would not buy a Tesla because I don't have this affinity with them. I don't have this emotional bond with them. So it allows us to understand that we can do a lot of effort in communicating messaging that resonates on the perception side, but as long as we don't move the needle on feelings and self-expansion, we're not getting change in consideration and change in the recommendation. We've been measuring different brands across feelings and self-expansion, and we can understand this texture of how feelings impact reputation. And we can just plot them in this quadrant analysis where we have valence, the positive, the positive and the negative in terms of feelings, and the arousal, which is, the intensity of these feelings. And we can plot all the brands and your benchmarks and understand where you fit into this model, right? If we take a look here at the top corner, where, we have PayPal, Coca-Cola, Pepsi as leading this concept of delight in terms of brands, how people feel, high in terms of happiness, high in terms of excitement, right? And then we can go down how, Verizon is very similar to Chase, how AT&T is similar to Bank of America, and we come to a Wells Fargo emotionally is still in a neutral space. So all the good things that we talked about Wells Fargo, it can continue to enhance and be better if we understand how to manage that affinity and now the feelings. How do we put that into the communication that we're doing? And then, we conclude the framework by understanding the business motivators and the actions. Again, this phrase for me is tremendously important. Reputation only matters if it drives action, right? And we're going to measure here traditional business or supported behaviors: consideration, recommendation, willingness to invest, willingness to work for the organization, willingness to forgive, to give you the benefit of the doubt, all the ones that we know that are the key KPIs for strategic reputation strategies. So at the end of the day, what we're doing here is going from emotions to actions. We created this model with a single goal in mind: to give communications a more precise, quicker, and emotionally intelligent advantage. Because reputation management isn't just about the number, it's about shaping human reactions. That's the new strategic edge that Morning Consult is bringing to you. Thank you very much. Bill, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ivan. And I know that was a lot, so we're going to switch over to Q&A quickly. But before we get there, just two more slides to sort of close out the session. If you go one more through, we wanted to also bring this back to kind of where we were starting. As you're thinking about that broad framework, all the different thoughts and strategies and the role of emotions all the way through actions, we also just wanted to make it super clear how that ties back to all the core research questions and business questions we get and work on each and every day as it relates to reputation. Of course, as Ivan shared, the reputation score is sitting in the intelligence platform, so it's already ready to be used for all the brands that we're measuring across many, many markets. And of course, a lot of this would apply to custom reputation tracking, deep dives and measurement, but everything we're doing as it relates to narrative tracking, sponsorships, employer brand, the range of custom reputation questions, this framework is guiding the development and the optimization of all the existing work. So we just wanted to sort of tie that back so you can sort of see the connectivity. And if you go to the last slide, and then we'll hop into the Q&A. Of course, like I said right from the beginning, our goal is not just to have a webinar. Our goal is to have conversations with every interested party. And if for anyone that really wants a personalized briefing on reputation, especially for the businesses among the thousands that we already have the data on, we'd be happy to schedule a dedicated session. And the idea there is we do core things like walk you through your existing reputation score, benchmark how you're doing against industry peers, look at all the audience level insights about what's going on for you and competitors or in and out of category, and have a conversation about opportunities that the data may be identifying or other questions you have, especially the strategic ones that naturally emerge that get to root causes, messaging, strategy, et cetera, that require custom solutions. So that's sort of the core content. Now I'm going to switch to the Q&A, and this is going to be a little bit of, I guess, art and science, because I'm looking at the questions, and I'm happy to share that there are many, and they're quite a range of questions. So I'm going to try to kick off with questions that are kind of thematic that we see more and more throughout. And the first question I'm going to share, Ivan, I've heard you talk about this a lot to me, so I want to direct this one your way. Make sure I get it correctly. Here we go. In today's world, what would you say is the difference between brand and reputation? And is there a difference? And when someone poses that question to you, how do you answer it?
Yes, it's a question that we hear often, and I always, from my point of view, I always take the concept of, we're measuring the corporation, we're measuring the corporate brand, right? And it's interesting when you take a look at it from that perspective. The brand basically is that promise that the organization makes to their stakeholders. right? And the reputation is this idea of, can you keep that promise? So that's why for when we were building the reputation score, brand appeal and corporate character were so important because, we want to understand how people see the brand promise. We want to see how, it's favorable, is it relevant, right? Is it authentic? We talked a lot about authenticity, right? But does it bring also, can I relate to it in terms of the value that it brings to me? So that's the brand appeal. The reputation side for me is more on the discussion, how do I keep that promise? Do you trust me as an organization? Am I the employer that I should be in your eyes for this sector? Am I treating my employees well? Are my employees talking about the company well? Would you work for me, right? But also, what is my participation in community, in environment, sustainability, etc. So for me, they go hand in hand. Reputation and brand, they go hand in hand. We're measuring the corporate brand here. Are you favorable to what we're putting out there? So this concept of authenticity, relevance, and value are tremendously key. But we cannot forget that people need to trust us. They need to see, how we appeal in terms of the sector, how we are in terms of our corporate, in terms of integrity, and how we manage, the concept of impacting the sector that we belong to. So I always talk about those two areas, and that's why the reputation score makes so much sense in terms of how we're putting it together.
Thanks. And I'm gonna add to that because there were so many questions related to it, and I know it's such a hot topic. Um, I think it's really important to think of the Venn diagram, where starting from the research side, and then we'll get to the business side. From the research side, there is a commonality of measuring predisposition associations with a business, service, or product that make you more inclined to either like it, to recommend it, to buy it, to consume it. So brand and reputation do have some overlaps. And some of the techniques Yvonne shared, we also use in more consumer brand type studies. But there's also big differences. Some of the biggest research differences tied basically down to the audiences, where we're doing many more niche audiences, whether they are policymakers, decision elites, even journalists, compared to big giant consumer studies on the brand side. On the brand side, we do a lot more about category entry points and sort of those real motivations for an action or a shopping decision in and out of the moment of purchase, and sometimes way before the moment of purchase. And sometimes we will have reputation elements in a brand study, but other times we really keep them separate because the audiences are so different. And the ultimate use cases sometimes are quite different, which ties right back to what Yvonne was talking about and reputation work on the sort of permission to play and all the benefits of reputation, where the brand work tends to be much closer to, did you buy this? Why did you buy this? Yes or no? So that's a hot topic, more than one conversation for sure, as I could tell from all the responses here. So if Yvonne, another one I'm going to send your way to start. Um, Knowing the existing reputation frameworks that are in the market, how would you say this helps make decisions better compared to the legacy models?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, for me, it was really interesting to see the work that Morning Consult was doing on brand and understanding, how are we getting to new ways of defining, this unconscious connection that we have with organizations. And this concept of feelings and emotions for me is really interesting in terms of how it's taking shape, because we need to build messages that really resonate with our stakeholders. Those messages have evolved right now to a lot of conversations around narratives. There are sector narratives, about how people feel that the sector should be performing, but there are also corporate narratives. So for me, the biggest points here is that we're adding an emotional component and we're adding this feeling component to some of what has been out there in the market. Nobody else has these two components in the same process. Because if you think about it on an ongoing basis, we start by understanding that emotional connection. And we know, and I know that there's a question around, with a challenge around accuracy on measuring unconscious emotions. We're measuring it on an implicit way, but we're trying to get through this model that has been tested and validated about the concentric circles and how people relate to an organization. that we've tested and now in brand and now we're using in reputation, it just allows us to understand how close or distant are our stakeholders, different stakeholders. I mean, we could even talk about investors, or we can talk about customers, or even, prospects, right? How close or separate are they from our organization? You could be a prospect and be very close to the organization, and you feel that you have that proximity, but there's something that hasn't let you come in to buy our products or buy our services. Then we go through all the conscious pieces, the perceptions, through the attributes which are unique for you, and we have a process to measure standard and unique ones. But then we come into the feeling side that separates feeling into this idea of how happy or how connected, or what are your feelings toward the organization and how intensive they are, right? But also the self-expansion, which is, do you have the affinity towards the organization? So knowing how close they are, knowing that there are positives and negatives in our attributes, we can craft messages that, if we know how close they are in terms of feelings and affinity towards the organization, we can tweak that language to talk about identity, to talk about values, to talk about emotional bonds that we haven't been able to track before. And tracking this over time, we'll see if the way that we are talking about our attributes or the perceptions that our stakeholders have towards the organization, is it changing that self-expansion? Is it changing those feelings? And at the end of the day, are we changing the most important one, which is those emotions towards the organization? Having that on a continuous basis, for me, is the key pillar of this new framework. Now, something that I have never been able to do before. I have now all the tools here on Morning Consult to implement it, to create it, and now to move forward with a process that communication can have, from emotions and understanding how they impact actions.
Awesome. So I'm gonna I'm gonna try to do something a little tricky. I'm gonna put a bunch of questions into one, and I'll answer this one because there's a
Okay,
bunch of questions that all tie to the scores themselves,
I see.
such as, are they available in real time? Where do they exist?
Mhm.
How does you define value and favorability in the scores, et cetera? There's a whole bunch like that. So let me address that as a group, um, and really to try to clarify. All the reputation score data sits in what we call Morning Consult Intelligence in our syndicated platform. That is an all day, everyday series of surveys that are completely standardized, that cover about 9 top line brand and reputation measures, that cover attitudes towards the economy, psychographics, attitudes towards politics, media
Mhm.
habits, and demographics. So it's constant. Some of it goes as far back as 2016, 2017. And then as it's grown, it's got all through today. And it's thousands of brands in about 44, 43, 44 markets. So all of that exists at scale in a platform that you can subscribe to and then log into to get the score. And while it is measured every day and available at weekly per brand, we often will look at it over longer time frames. As we know, some of this stuff evolves very slowly. But in particular, when you take into account everything Yvonne shared and what's going on, we also see things change fast. And all of that is then tied back to all those audience level insights, because the aggregate level trends are one thing. The disaggregate level trends by region, by segment, by ideology are where we're really seeing narratives emerge all the time. Um, in those top line measures are where we have our standardized value, favorability, trust, community impact, admired employer that Yvonne was going through. Those are asked the same for every brand because they're asked out of category. And there are a bunch of questions here like, oh, um, how do you then decompose that? And that ties right into what Yvonne was sharing. We would look at audience differences. We would look at change over time. We would tie it to spend and other factors outside the platform. But all of the emotional depth and all of the deep dives is where the custom solutions come in. So the platform has tons of information. It's amazing and highly empowering and fully real time as we get into the reputation score in particular. Um, but as we're thinking about emotional depth, as we're thinking about these other things, that's where all the custom solutions come in. So I just wanted to share that because there was a bunch of questions related to it. Ivan, would you add anything?
No, I think it's great. From my perspective, coming into Morning Consult, that's the value of it, having all that information that usually you know clients have to go in and do special research and find out some of the things. It's available there. You can understand the what's going on, what is happening across markets, and then move into the framework and understand the why and go deeper into asking the why questions.
Yep. And another one that I'm going to take, but let me just, because it's been asked about 4 or 5 different ways, so let me try to summarize it. Um, this is all great. Does it tie to sales? I think that's the simplest way to summarize it. There's some that are much fancier questions, but ultimately, has it been validated to real world business outcomes? And the short answer is yes, it has. The longer answer is in many different ways, shapes, and sizes. So
Exactly.
for us, validation takes many forms. We do a ton of work that are or is client specific, where we're kind of doing a consulting specific engagement that's all confidential and can't share. But we also do tons of work looking at the data across clients in a completely public manner. And what we've really validated the most is the relationship of all the core elements with real world behaviors. We've both done that internally and externally. We've done that across lots of brands. We've done that at a category level. What we're going to do next is the score, because the score is the summary of those elements. But we have loads of validation to business outcomes for all the data already, and all of those outcomes tied to the score and all the interrelationships therein. So
As
given
well as the emotions and the feelings that we
and
already
and
started
all the
doing.
emotions and feelings too. That's right. And that's all done outside the platform. From
Mhm.
within the platform, all of those core 9 measures have been validated repeatedly across multiple businesses. And what makes me particularly happy, kind of as a old school analytics guy, a lot of the validation isn't even done by us, it's done by others, which I feel gives us a lot more of the credibility because we could others publishing, hey, we just did this with morning consult data, and here's the impact on business outcomes. So that covers a lot. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Um, and Yvonne, this is an interesting one. I see 3 or 4 of these. Uh, are you seeing a relationship here where it's more used by communications alone or marketing as well? And as we're talking about communications, you kind of driving decisions, do we see any interactions with marketing? Do we see marketing sort of losing some of their strength? There's a bunch of questions that kind of look at different angles of the
Mhm.
communication execs and the marketing execs as end users and decision makers.
That's great. Oh, that's I love the one word I say on that question is embedding. This is great because we're embedding reputation across the organization. No, there's not, communications, marketing, HR, risk, investor relationship. Everybody can have value from working with reputation. Reputation needs to be embedded across the organization. The strategic table that the communication team is sitting at right now, right, allows them to talk about strategy across the organization. That's when I've seen, the best teams outperform, what they're doing. When they take reputation, use it with marketing, how marketing can see how the house of brand benefits for having the corporate brand in their products, how they see that elevates the reputation, the loyalty, how that elevates the security of buying their brands. But then we go and we embed reputation on HR, and we take a look at how we can be an employer of choice. How do we attract talent? How do we keep talent, right? And have from the perspective of our attributes, our feelings, our emotions, how do we tackle now the communication that we're doing for job seekers? And then we move to the other side and we go into investor relationship, and then crisis and all these other groups, how do they take, pieces of this model and embed it into their work, because it's part of understanding, where value comes from, where risk comes from, where do we build mitigation projects. Usually, you don't start something on a crisis. We build an acumen in terms by prior to a crisis, right? So we know how to act. MCI is amazing for crisis daily, that we can take a look at millions of understanding of how companies react. But when we're talking to risk and crisis team, we can work pre-crisis, pre-event, and just work with them. So embedded, that's the big word. How do we embed reputation across the organization? And it's all working for the same strategic focus.
Yep. Awesome. So I'm going to answer just two more tactical questions that have come up a few different angles, and then we'll close out. Um, but there's a bunch of questions that are tied to the role of awareness in the model and how the index is actually calculated and how high does it go. So just the short version is yes, it is indexed as 0 to 100. Generally in the upper 80s is really good. I think Yvonne showed some nonprofits that tend to be some of the highest performers. Uh,
Yes.
and like we said, it's accounting for positives and negatives. And in the white papers, the actual calculation, it's very straightforward and how it works. And the awareness question is particularly interesting. What we ultimately did was take kind of a empirical answer, meaning when you're in the actual platform, the data is calculated without controlling for awareness, but it gives the user the option to rebase to awareness. And the reason we did that was instead of putting a stake in the ground saying this has to be done one way or the other, it really helps to look at it multiple ways and kind of uncover the data and let the story emerge from different lenses. And a lot of our end users really appreciate that because they don't want us constraining it has to be looked at this way or that way. It gives a little more flexibility. So in the platform, that's baked in. All right, there are more questions, but we are out of time. So again, want to thank everyone for participating. These are great questions. I could clearly tell the audience very engaged. Want to again offer out for the personalized briefing, just scan the QR code or go to our website and connect. And we greatly appreciate your time and attention. And have a great day.
Thank you very much.